The most concerning topic on America's mind right now isn't the economy, although it's right up there. It's actually the border crisis and whether the United States is being invaded. To help me with that, I have special guest Chris Clem. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today.
Glad to be here. And yes, it is a very important topic, and look forward to the conversation today.
So just some context, you're retired Border Patrol chief. You understand this border inside and out from your Twitter and online. You are following this regularly. You're talking about the Democrat side, the Republican side. So I know my audience is very curious about this situation. Just right out of the gates, from your perspective, the current border situation, the number of illegals entering the country, is this just concerning, or is this an actual national security risk?
Well, both, right? It is concerning because it's a national security risk. For context and for you and everyone that's watching and listening, I spent over 27 and a half years as a U.S. Border Patrol agent. I started in New Mexico as a young trainee, El Paso, back to New Mexico, over to Arizona, Washington, D.C. I was an associate chief, an acting chief in Washington. I was a deputy chief of New Orleans, Louisiana sector, dealing with coastal interdiction and over-the-road interdiction. Then I was the deputy chief in El Paso when it was ground zero. And then I was the chief patrol agent, the person in charge of everything in southeastern California and southwestern Arizona for my last 2 years when Yuma was ground zero. And it's important because I watched an evolution. I began in 1995 under President Clinton. I worked for 5 administrations, and every administration, made progress and addressed the security piece of the border. Immigration and border security often get conflated, especially by our politicians, right? Because everybody, they want to have an emotional connection. But what we have seen is this truly an evolution from migrant farm workers that were mainly Mexican nationals, single adults coming over here looking for work, stay for a season and go back. Some Central American agricultural laborers that would come in and kind of migrate through the seasons from the West Coast to the East Coast, to this phenomena over the last few years of a worldwide problem. And my last 2 years as chief in Yuma, we had 116 and 117 different countries. Mexico and Central America rarely made my daily or weekly top 10 nationalities. And one more thing for context to kind of really get into the meat of your question is in 2020, when I first got there, the end of fiscal year 20, Yuma sector had just over 8,800 arrests, which is nothing. It's easy. That's fun work for the Border Patrol. Under the first year under the Biden administration, we went up to 114,000 arrests in Yuma, to 312,000 arrests in Yuma. Now, let me give you some national numbers. In 2019, we had just over 900,000 arrests across the entire United States by Border Patrol. It dropped down to 405,000 arrests, skyrocketed to 1.66 million in 21, to 2.2 million in 22, the same number, slightly higher in 23. And we're going to fall somewhere in about the 1.8 million category. And those are just arrests, not the gotaways. And we are catching people from all over the world. Just last year, we had just over 24,000 arrests of Chinese nationals. So far through the first 6 months of this fiscal year, we've already topped 24,000, Chinese nationals. And I don't ever want to broad brush a demographic or a culture or a nationality, but we know China is one of our biggest geopolitical opponents. And you don't just get to leave China. You're allowed to leave China. So that's concerning. Middle Eastern countries, people on the terrorist watch list, all of this is coming in. And one other thing, too, is if you go on and look at the stats, the 4 years under the previous administration compared to the 3.5 years so far under this administration, the number of criminal aliens encountered at the border is doubled or tripled in certain categories. And statistically speaking, we don't know who is in those gotaways, that 1.5 to 1.8 million known gotaways. But statistically speaking, there's going to be those type of people in those gotaways. That's why It is a public safety and national security concern that, we do not politicize the border. We protect the border. It is an American problem, not a left or right problem. It's actually become a betrayal under this administration because they refuse to act on the security piece. They want to focus on migrant facilitation. They want to get people in so they can get their hearings. Look, these are people that have come in illegally. They're immediately, their first step in the country is violating our laws. So we do have a national security interest in securing this border. And when you have FBI Director Wray testify twice in the last 6 months about the alerts and bells and whistles going off as busy as it's been since 9/11, that's a concern. So border security is national security. And you're seeing this play out, these threats and some of this problems showing up all around the country. So again, a long answer because we need to provide context. But yes, it absolutely is a security threat because our agents are tied up processing and the cartels are controlling the border a little bit more than the American law enforcement is at this time.
Wow. Yeah, I read just within the last 10 days that there's been an 8,000% increase in the number of Chinese men coming into the country. And then I also read that San Diego just had one of its highest illegal immigrant, weeks since the early 90s. And not one of them was from Mexico, not one. And so this is alarming. But like you say, the thing that's most alarming is we see who's coming. We don't know who they are. But then the ones that get away, we have no clue who they are or why they're here. And why does it, maybe you could confirm this. Why is the media telling us so often that it's mostly military-aged men that are coming? Is that true?
Yeah, so you bring up some very interesting points. In the early 90s and late 80s, it was all about San Diego, California. They got it right when we looked at some of the operations we did in the early 90s. And right when I came in 1995, they were just kind of, the policy and the practice of how we were looking at, operations and how we were deploying infrastructure. San Diego became pretty much the model of how a sector should look when it comes down to the proper wall, fencing, light, technology, all the things that we've been advocating for decades. And now just in the last month or so, we've started seeing an uptick in numbers in San Diego and places out west. I'm in Arizona, so it's just my neighbors to the west. We've been seeing an uptick in all sorts of people showing up right at the outskirts of San Diego sector, right in what we call the grade up in the mountains there on the San Diego County line in the Jacumba, California area. And those are, groups of 25, 50, 100 at a time showing up, sometimes more. And they're from all over the country, all over the world. And yeah, an uptick in these Chinese nationals. And it's crazy because I think the numbers in 22, we had 450 arrests of Chinese nationals. And then it went up to 24,000. And again, another, exceeded 24,000 so far this year. But the overall numbers and the sheer numbers are just through the roof out there, and they're being released. Really the crux of it is we don't know who all these people are. We don't know, other than if they have documents, whether it's a visa or some kind of passport, if they have that on them and a legitimate document, then we can at least start, checking against the database. But so many of them are discarding their IDs, and we really kind of have to take their word for it. Now, I want everybody to know that when we catch somebody, we take their biometrics, right? We get their fingerprints and their photographs, and we do the best we can through translation services if they're non-English speaking. And if there's nothing against that database, in other words, if we run them as Jane Doe or John Doe, and we take their fingerprints and nothing shows up, if there's no room at ICE, which there's no room at ICE, we end up releasing these people. And we don't know what their intents are. We don't know who their sponsors are. We have to believe their story. And that's a huge concern. And that becomes a threat because not everybody is fleeing, their country. Not everybody is coming over here for the right reasons. And we cannot be naive to that. But it is a concern. We're seeing those numbers uptick. In fact, I was just in that area in Jacumba about 2 weeks ago, driving to San Diego, and sure enough, there was a couple hundred people on the side of the road there. It's just it's amazing. I hope I answered the question there. I got kind of excited about talking about it, but yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable that this is occurring, because there's so much of that conflating of poor migrants, and yeah, there are some in that bunch that are seeking the right relief that we can offer, but there's so many more that don't, and it's causing the system that's already been kind of damaged to be broken.
Yeah. Well, I think that's how the person that killed Lincoln Riley got in. Is the detention center was full, and they just said, well, just let him go, and so yeah, that unfortunately is happening. Congress is dead set on getting as much taxpayer money to Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan, and the American people seem to be against their representatives wanting to do that. I'm just curious if you thought about what $100 billion would do on our own border compared to caring about other countries' borders so much.
Well, it's an awesome question, because I tell you this, I have no problem helping our allies out, but charity starts at home. We have to take care of American people and the problems here. Today's the day after it's Memorial Day. Today is actually the 100th anniversary of the U.S. Border Patrol. We're filming this. But when you have homeless and hungry veterans and children and people that are suffering in this our country, we need to be spending that money in the right way. But to your point, go back a couple of years ago under President Trump, and Speaker Pelosi said they just don't have the money, the $5 billion that he needed to finish the wall. And yet we've spent $93 billion, I think, in Ukraine alone, if I'm not mistaken. I get very frustrated, because I like to tell people, to give context, that candidate Trump back in 2015 and 16 ran on building the wall. But it was much more than a wall for Border Patrol agents. In fact, when it became President Trump and it was time to put his money where his mouth is, what are we going to do? It was a culmination of decades of requirements that Border Patrol has seen proven to work. You build wall, fence, whatever you want to call it, where it makes sense in the urban operating environments where they can vanish within seconds to minutes. You put up technology in the form of lights, cameras, sensor devices. All of this is what we need to secure the border. And it's not cheap. It costs money, but it can be done right. And we were in that phase under the Trump administration. In fact, we had seen the culmination of all the things that I had worked for and asked for as an agent, as a chief, what my agents needed. It was playing out. It was playing out in 2019, 2020. Unfortunately, when the Biden administration took over, and I think there was close to 90-something executive orders within the first few weeks and months of his administration that ended that. Like, in the wall, it wasn't just the wall that got ended. It was all that system that we had worked for, the technology. I literally had, not only did I have gaps in the fence or the wall with huge stacks of steel waiting, I had camera towers. I had light poles that we couldn't plug in, or they were just sitting there that couldn't be erected because all that was stopped under the contract. So when we see that plan and we see that it was working, that it was helping us become more secure, it is almost a betrayal and a borderline offensive when we spend all that money on other countries to protect their borders and without protecting ours first. Again, I've got no problem helping our allies, keeping them safe so things stay away from us. But we have an obligation to take care of our sovereignty at our borders. And again, secure the border and make that a standalone border bill. Don't get all the immigration and quotas and numbers and all that. Talk about the physical and the technology needed to secure the border. Let's get that done. Let's get that enacted. Then we can start worrying about the immigration piece, because as soon as Congress wants this big old bill, then it becomes not about solutions. It comes about trade-offs. And that's why you've seen in that failed Senate bill, they wanted more money here and more money there, and we're going to do this about processing and get more judges and computers to process. There was nothing about finishing the wall or putting more camera towers up there or more high-tech surveillance. It was all about migrant facilitation. And until we can get the common sense people to sit there and go, hey, this is an American problem. The Republicans don't own it. The Democrats don't own it. The independents, it's America owns it. Secure our border. Then we can talk about immigration. Then we can talk about spending money, in other countries to help them with their threats. But why our politicians continue to punt this downrange is beyond me. And for the record, the Senate bill was not a border security bill. It was an immigration facilitation bill with very few things that would have stopped anything that's going on. HR 2 has been sitting there on Schumer's desk for over almost a year now, if not more. And that was about building the wall, adding the technology, giving more border patrol agents, putting the policies back in place. That's a very good start to a border security bill. Not perfect, but it's the best starting block that I've seen. And of course, no one's talking about that one anymore. It's crazy.
Yeah, I see Mitch McConnell blaming Schumer. I see Schumer blaming Mitch McConnell. But as I dig in and look at it, from a Democrat perspective, it does look more like, how do we process people more efficiently, where the Republican bill looks like, how do we keep people we don't want in the country out, and how do we bring in the people that we do want? And so there's just such a big difference in the perspective. And even Chuck Schumer said, listen, Americans aren't having babies like they used to. We've got to have even more immigration. I mean, he just comes right out and says it. They just want more and more immigrants in, instead of saying, hey, let's try to incentivize Americans to have more babies, families to have more babies. It's just, we just got to get more people into the country. Elaborate just a little bit more, because what I'm seeing is the Democrat bill really is about processing people better. And Biden even said that at the State of the Union. Oh, instead of taking 10 years like Republicans want, we could get people done in 6 months. But he's talking about processing them and getting them in, not keeping them out.
Yeah, that's exactly that's what I experienced the last 2 years of my career. And quite honestly, I didn't see anything. I retired 5 years before I was even mandatory. I just didn't see any hope in this administration changing on the security piece. It's all about migrant facilitation. These people, again, they call them asylum seekers and newcomers and all. At the end of the day, no one is addressing the threat that an open border or a vulnerable border causes to America. And so, yeah, if you kind of break down that Senate bill, it was about funding processing centers. It was about funding more immigration judges that the department could control. It was really kind of crazy. I think it's important to let people understand that there was a number, and when you hear about it, it was like 4,000 a day on a 7-day average would constitute an emergency, so that the president could shut it down. All right. Well, first of all, 4,000 a day, that's ridiculous. All right. That's already a problem. And then a single day of 5,000 would shut it down. Let me give you some context there too. In my sector in Yuma, 126 linear miles of southeastern California, southwestern Arizona, about 950 border patrol agents to include myself. We were catching 1,000 a day. If we caught more than 1,200 a day for 2 or 3 days, it would literally, we would collapse. We would not have anybody out there on the border. So when you have a bill that codifies a number of up to 4,000 a day, you don't think the cartels on the other side are saying, okay, well, let's send 2,000 a day to Yuma, and then we'll spread the other 1,900 across the southwest border. We'll sink Yuma, and then we can send all these high value targets because Yuma won't be patrolling the border. But I would have had zero authority as the chief to shut it down. The port director wouldn't have been able to have any authority to shut it down because it wouldn't have met the numbers that would have been codified in that Senate bill. And I can only imagine the number of hoops I would have to jump through to say, hey, I need help. And they go, well, it didn't reach that 4,000 number. That was terrible. Okay. And the people will rationalize saying, well, we weren't saying we were letting 4,000 a day go. Oh, yes, they were. Okay. Because they're not detaining them. Now, there was one piece, to give credit where credit, there was one piece that talked about, increasing the amount of detention space at ICE up to 50,000 a day. Well, that's what they started with. This administration cut it in half. Now, all of a sudden, they realize, okay, we've got a detention problem. But it was all about giving them multiple bites at the apple. The president in his State of the Union and this bill presupposes that everybody meets these requirements, that they're going to make it. I guarantee you they would have lowered the bar to allow economic migrants to meet asylum claims. I have no doubt about that. This opinion, but I know how this administration has been operating. I know how Secretary Mayorkas operates. He's been in charge of USCIS for the first 4 years under President Obama. He was the deputy secretary in the last 4 years of President Obama. And now he's been the secretary under President Biden. So for 12 out of the last 16 years, he's been basically in charge of everything that's happened at the border. So I've seen that trend of more about migrant facilitation, less about securing the border. Now, I do think, and without them telling us, you got to wonder why. Now, Chuck Schumer in his comments, he's rationalizing why we're doing this. Oh, we can't find the workforce, or, well, why? Because things are just terrible all around in the country, right? People have been, are almost paid to stay home. Second of all, if we're not having babies, that's because people are thinking like, hey, I can't afford to have more children, or maybe they're concerned because of what they may not have done during the pandemic. So, and then lastly, the migration patterns are completely blown up. I mean, they're just all coming year round. There's no more seasonal trends, and you always kind of get, people would dismiss you if you talked about the answer why. Like, why are they doing this? And without them telling us what their plan is, you kind of start making your own ideas. And it's like, really, I think they want people in here because the census now is based on population. They removed the citizenship question there. So the party in power thinks maybe, hey, if we can put more people in a blue district, we can maybe get some more representatives, or if we can make a purple district turn our color or whatever. I think there's something to that because the amount of immigration and illegal immigration we're dealing with, no country on this earth could sustain that. And it's breaking the system, and it's causing so much delay for the ones that we've been trying to attract and attain for the right reasons. Look, I'll wrap this part of the question up. Again, I'm a little long-winded on this, but because there's really no real answer because they're not telling us. But if our labor force is not working for a small business or a large business or whatever is needed, then we have to go outside. But we should be recruiting and attracting those people, not what we're seeing coming across the border illegally right now. These are not highly skilled people. I'm sorry, I've seen it. I witnessed it. And kind of to the question a minute ago, they are 18 to 35-year-old single adults, military-aged men that are coming over here. They're not over here looking. They're not coming over here with these degrees and science backgrounds. They're unskilled laborers coming over here, or they're up to something else. There's a saying about men leave their families behind when they go to war. That's why I think there's a lot of concern when you see thousands coming across between 18 and 35 without families. And so again, why is this happening, and why is this administration trying to facilitate their release so quickly? You know what? If they built a detention centers for 250,000 people and we detained people as long as we could until they had their hearing, if the judge decided they get to stay, then so be it. But if the judge decides that they don't get to stay, then we need to remove them quickly. That's the only way we're going to do this. And this Senate bill and a lot of the Democrats that support this administration's policies, it's like giving buckets to bail out water in a boat instead of fixing the leak. That's all it is. When you're hiring more people to process quicker, giving more computers to process quicker, that's just giving you more buckets to bail out. No one's fixing the leak. No one in this administration is saying, hey, this isn't working. It's sinking our ship. Fix the leak, get the boat out of the water as quickly as possible. And that means, and I'm bouncing the camera, sorry about that. We're not dealing with the source countries. We're not holding other countries around the world accountable. And so, again, we're dealing with this mess, and we've been dealing with this mess for the last 3.5 years. So, again, long-winded answer. I hope I hit those points there. But it's again, I wish it was – if it was easy, I think we'd have it fixed. But it's people, so it's complicated, and there's politics involved. So that makes it even worse. Yeah.
Okay, final question. I appreciate you coming on, Chris. I saw a video of an illegal immigrant that came over from Turkey, and he was saying in the interview, it is so easy to get into America, and then the taxpayers, they take care of you, like it's really, really great. But then he said he's actually very worried for America because he knows that there's a lot of psychopaths that are planning to come here. And if he could get in this easy, it actually makes him scared to be in our country. What are your thoughts on this gentleman's comments?
Yeah, I think we need to get him in front of Congress and let him speak the truth, because that's exactly what all our agents have concerns with. It's what I have a concern with. That was right there in the Jacumba, California area. If somebody who is using the smuggling routes, I think he even admitted paying like $10,000 or more to get over here. He's going through the same smuggling and cartel networks as everybody else is, and he's seen what he's seeing, and what he's describing is there's people that aren't good that are coming in here, and he came on here, entered the country illegally. Nobody stopped him. He's waiting on a ride. Look, even President Obama's secretary, Jay Johnson, has been on record saying the U.S. government is completing the smuggling cycle. I mean, this is what is happening, right? This person is going to be caught. He's going to be processed. They may or may not have detention room for ICE in California, because that's where he'll go. And he's likely to be released. And if he doesn't have any criminal history, if he doesn't have any immigration history, he's likely to be released. This could happen to anybody that comes across this border. And that, when you hear that from an immigrant himself, from who entered illegally, willingly said, yeah, I came across illegally. I paid $10,000 to get here. And I'm even kind of worried about what's going on. I mean, I don't know. I don't know who else could tell this to the American public. From retired chiefs to even our sitting chief has talked about the threats that we're facing. Now you've got an illegal alien that has crossed and said this is a problem. I don't know what else is going to take. I just hope people remember that when they go to the voting booth in November, that we've got to do it right. We have to get our border secure. Take the emotion, the immigration emotion out of it. Look at this from a national security perspective, saying we got to get this right. And honestly, as somebody who has spent their entire professional career as a Border Patrol agent and retired chief, I don't really, if we get the security piece right, I'm going to be very indifferent on what we do with the immigration piece, because I think that immigration the right way, people coming in on the invite list, coming through the front door, knocking and asking to come in, is healthy. It keeps the country growing. It's where we want to be. But when you start conflating all of this stuff and you start making this thing a big mess, nothing gets done. The immigration system suffers, the border security suffers, and most importantly, the American people suffer. And that's why we have to get this right. And we have very much every reason to be concerned about what is being coming in and what's being let go and what we don't know that's getting in.
Yeah. Chris, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come on. If people want to follow you online, what is the best place that I could send them?
Yeah, that would be my X account at Clem Official. That's C as in Chris and Clem, CLEM Official. That's my X account. I'm on there daily. I'm not a huge online person, but I do try to post or quote or comment and give context to articles relating to border security as you know, it's appropriate for my followers and those that are concerned. And so, yeah, I thank you for having me on and having this conversation. Could go on for days. I know I got a little long-winded on some of the responses, but it is it can be fixed if we look at things from a security piece first. That is so necessary, and it upholds the integrity of the entire system if you get it secure.
Great. Well, thank you for your service to our country. And you know, now you're retired, but you're still putting in the hours to protect us, give great ideas, raise awareness, educate people. So thank you so much for that. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You do the same.